Welcome back to Face the Nation. We now turn to the Congressional Committee investigating January 6th. Republican Liz Cheney of Wyoming is the vice chair of the committee, and she joins us now from Capitol Hill. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Margaret. Thank you for having me.
We know Democrats are planning a vigil. We know the former president is planning a news conference. Are you concerned about the country being at risk of political violence this week and in the years ahead?
Look, I think that if what he has been saying since he left office is any indication, former President Trump is likely again this week to make the same false claims about the election that he knows to be false, and the same false claims about the election that he knows caused violence on January 6th. I think that it is indeed very concerning, given what we know happened in the lead up to the 6th and what the committee is finding out about the events of that day. But I think that it's not surprising. But again, he knows these claims caused violence. And we've seen now people who were in the Capitol, people who've been arrested because of their activities on that day. They themselves have told us in court filings, they've told us on social media, we've seen it on videos, that they were here because Donald Trump told them to be here. And so he's doing this press conference on the 6th. Again, if he makes those same claims, he's doing it with complete understanding and knowledge of what those claims have caused in the past.
You've raised in the past the possibility of criminal culpability for the president. Is that the consensus view of the committee?
Look, the committee is obviously going to follow the facts wherever they lead. We've made tremendous progress. We have had now, if you just think about, for example, what we know now about what the former president was doing on the 6th while the attack was underway, the committee has firsthand testimony that President Trump was sitting in the dining room next to the Oval Office watching on television as the Capitol was assaulted, as the violence occurred. We know that that is clearly a supreme dereliction of duty. One of the things that the committee is looking at from the perspective of our legislative purpose is whether we need enhanced penalties for that kind of dereliction of duty. But we've certainly never seen anything like that as a nation before.
One of the things that we've seen in CBS polling is that there is just a hard percentage of the population that believes what the former president is claiming. 8 million people believe in violence to restore him to office. 7 out of 10 Republicans still believe President Biden's illegitimate. 66% believe there was widespread voter fraud. So these numbers are pretty hard here. Why hasn't this conviction abated within your party?
Look, I think that we're in a situation where people have got to understand the danger of President Trump and the danger that he posed on that day. You know, if you think, Margaret, he could have simply walked a few feet to the White House briefing room. He could have gone immediately on live television and asked his supporters to stop what was happening, asked them to go home. He failed to do that. He instead, we know, had the motivation. At the same time the violent assault was happening, he's watching television. He's also calling at least one senator urging delay of the electoral vote. So this is a man who has demonstrated that he is at war with the rule of law. He's demonstrated that he's willing to blow through every guardrail of democracy, and he can never be anywhere near the Oval Office again. He's demonstrated a complete lack of fitness for office. I think one of the really important things that our committee has to do is lay these facts out for the American people so that they really have a sense of the truth of what happened that day, and so that they inform us in terms of our legislative activity going forward.
That assumes facts can actually persuade. What happens with this committee if Republicans take the majority in 2022? Have you asked Kevin McCarthy to keep it?
Look, you know, Leader McCarthy has said a variety of things. He has both acted to obstruct the operations of the committee, but he's also, on a couple of occasions, said that he's willing to come talk to the committee. I think that the American people, again, and particularly the Republican Party, you know, we as Republicans have a choice to make. I am a conservative Republican. I believe strongly in the policies of low taxes and limited government and a strong national defense. I think the country needs a strong Republican Party going forward, but our party has to choose. We can either be loyal to Donald Trump or we can be loyal to the Constitution, but we cannot be both. And right now, there are far too many Republicans who are trying to enable the former president, embrace the former president, look the other way, and hope that the former president goes away, trying to obstruct the activities of this committee. But we won't be deterred.
In a number of state capitals around the country, in 19 different states, election laws are being changed, and in some there is concern that Republican-controlled legislatures could be able to change certification of an election if they don't like the outcome of it. This is undermining confidence among some in the public about the integrity of our elections. Would you ask your fellow Republicans in states around the country to stop trying to do that?
Absolutely. I think that, again, as a nation, we've got to be founded on the rule of law. We've got to be founded on fidelity to the Constitution. And when you look at what former President Trump continues to do to this day, in terms of trying to undermine our belief in our democratic process, in terms of trying to undermine the rule of law, in terms of trying to find local officials who will help him do that. One of the really important lessons we learned on January 6th was how important it was that we had a few individuals who stood up. We had individuals at the Department of Justice before January 6th who stood up to the president, who said, absolutely not, we will not claim that this election was stolen, who told him the truth. And we had local officials in the party, the Republican Party, who did the same.
We have congressional races in 2022. You yourself are running. Out in Wyoming, we know the former president endorsed your primary opponent. He's promised to help campaign against you. You have one of his biggest donors, Peter Thiel, a billionaire, throwing money behind your primary opponent. This is a direct challenge here. Given how red your state is, how do you expect to win that primary?
Look, I am absolutely honored and privileged to be able to represent the people of Wyoming in Congress. I absolutely anticipate that we will have a very energetic and hard-fought campaign this year. But at the end of the day, I am also incredibly privileged to be able to stand up and defend the Constitution of the United States. And I'm confident that the people of Wyoming will not choose loyalty to one man. One man as dangerous as Donald Trump is. Imagine a man who, while the violent assault was underway, while he was watching television, watching it unfold, not telling his supporters to stop and go home, instead was sending out a tweet saying that Mike Pence was a coward. This is a man who is simply too dangerous ever to play a role again in our democracy. And I look forward to the opportunity to continue to help the American people see the facts about what happened and to continue to make the case at home about the kind of representation that we need in Washington for the people of Wyoming.
Would you be willing to run against him in 2024?
I'm very focused right now on my reelection and on the work of the Select Committee. And I can tell you that the single most important thing, though, is to ensure that Donald Trump is not the Republican nominee and that he certainly is not anywhere close to the Oval Office ever again.
Congresswoman Cheney, thank you for your time today. We'll be right back with the chair of the House Intelligence Committee. We go now to a Democrat on that January 6th committee, House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff. He wears both hats. Good morning to you, Congressman.
Good morning.
When will you begin public hearings, and what is the purpose of them?
We should begin them, I hope, in a matter of weeks, if not a couple months from now. And what we expect to do is lay out what we've been learning for the American people. There were several lines of effort to overturn the election. There was, of course, the lies being promulgated by the former president, but also efforts with local elections officials and state legislators, efforts at the Justice Department, and, of course, the violent attack on January 6th. And we hope to be able to tell the story to the country so that they understand it isn't just about that one day, January 6th, but all that led up to it, what happened on that day, and the continuing danger going forward.
So exactly what degree of coordination have you seen so far, particularly between those within the Trump White House, political operatives, and the 725 people that that have been charged by the Justice Department?
Well, this is really a focal point of our investigation, and that is what was the role of the former president, what was the role of his aides and advisors. Certainly they were integrally involved in many of those lines of effort. In terms of the actual violent attack on the Capitol, how much expectation of violence was there? How much was that part of the plan, either spontaneously or in terms of any predisposition towards violence that day? That is still a matter under deep investigation. But we intend to use every effort to get out the full facts and expose them to the American people and take legislative action to protect the country going forward. But that issue, that is, what was the White House role in what happened on the 6th that led to the first violent attack in a century and a half, if not longer, is at the core of our investigation.
Because you have oversight in your Intelligence Committee role, I want to know to what degree you think this was an intelligence failure. Was there just a failure of imagination in terms of too much focus on militias and organized groups versus sort of a diffused threat of political violence? Why was this missed?
You know, I think that in part is an intelligence failure. That is, the failure to see all the evidence that was out there to be seen of the propensity for violence that day, a lot of it on social media. Now, there are answers for why the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security failed to see it as clearly as they should have, and we're looking into that. But we shouldn't be distracted from the fact that, yes, while there were things that could and should have been done to protect the Capitol that day, the primary lever, instrument, the cause of that violence was the promulgation of a big lie by the former president. As his supporters said, who came and attacked the Capitol that day, they felt like they were following the president's instructions. So it's important to that we don't lose sight of the real motivating cause here, and not just focus on the security of the building. It's also vital we understand that this was an attack inspired by the commander-in-chief.
This is going to go to the Supreme Court in terms of determining whether some of the records from the Trump administration will be released to your committee. If there is a lengthy delay, if the Supreme Court hears this out, how negatively will that impact your work? I mean, how badly do you need those documents?
Well, we have gotten tens of thousands of documents and had hundreds of witnesses, so we're trying to get information in various means and form so that we're not solely dependent on that litigation. But of course, it's the hope of Donald Trump and his acolytes that they can delay until they can deny justice. I don't think they'll be successful. I think the court understands, and the courts have been moving with great alacrity, that really delay is the strategy. It's not about the merits of litigation so much as it is depriving Congress and the American people of information they believe, I assume, would be incriminating to them. But when it does go before the Supreme Court, we will get a sense of whether that court is a conservative court or whether it has become just a partisan court. If it's a conservative court, it will not disturb the decisions below, which I think have clearly held that Congress has a right to this information under these circumstances. You have the executive branch represented by Joe Biden and the legislative branch in accord. It would be extraordinary for the judicial branch to differ with both other branches of government.
In your Intel Committee role, I want to ask you about Russia. What specifically would stop Vladimir Putin from his aggression? Do you need to cut that country off from the global financial system to sanction him personally?
Well, I think that it would require enormous sanctions on Russia to deter what appears to be a very likely Russian invasion of Ukraine again. And I think our allies need to be solidly on board with it. Russia needs to understand we are united in this. I also think that a powerful deterrent is the understanding that if they do invade, it is going to bring NATO closer to Russia, not push it farther away. That we will move more NATO assets closer to Russia, that will have the opposite impact of what Putin is trying to achieve. So the combination, I think, of very strong sanctions, and I certainly have no problem of going after Putin personally, but I think more the sector-sized sanctions will be the most important. But beyond that, the knowledge that, in fact, we will move more NATO assets closer to Russia, not further away, if they once again bring war to Ukraine.
Very quickly, do you fear these diplomatic talks are just building a pretext for Russia to say they have no choice but to invade?
I fear that Putin is very likely to invade. I still, frankly, don't understand the full motivation for why now he's doing this, but he certainly appears intent on it, unless we can persuade him otherwise. And I think nothing other than a level of sanctions that Russia has never seen will deter him, and that's exactly what we need to do with our allies.
All right, Congressman Schiff, thank you for your time. We'll be right back. We want to take a closer look now at the 725 people who've been charged for their roles in the attack on the Capitol. Who are these individuals, and what can we learn from their backgrounds that can help us understand the political violence that we saw that day on January 6th? Joining us now is Professor Robert Pape of the University of Chicago. Professor, I know you've studied insurgencies in war zones. You're working with the Pentagon now. I mean, you're looking at what is happening in the United States. And one of the things that was chilling to me was that you found the majority of those who attacked were not affiliated with any organized militia. They were everyday people.
Exactly right, Margaret. What we're seeing is a movement that is a mainstream movement, not simply confined to fringe elements. And this is important because we're so used to thinking of right-wing extremism, or really extremism in general, as part of the fringe. They're just a tiny fraction of America, less than 1%. And they come from people that are economically destitute, many often unemployed. Well, that's not what our studies of the January 6th, those who broke into the Capitol on January 6th show, or our studies of the insurrectionist sentiments in the country.
And what you found is that some of these people were business owners. They were employed. These were people who had something to lose. They were putting things at risk when they went to Washington and carried out this violence.
Absolutely. Very striking finding is their economic profile. Over half of the 700 who broke into the Capitol, who've been arrested so far for breaking into the Capitol, are business owners, CEOs, from white-collar occupations, doctors, lawyers, architects, and accountants. Only 7% were unemployed at the time of their January 6th insurrection, nearly the national average. This is very different than we're used to seeing from right-wing extremists, where typically 25%, 30% of right-wing violent offenders are unemployed, and virtually none are CEOs or business owners. Further, if we look at their relationship to the militia groups, so only 13% of those who broke into the Capitol on January 6th were members of militia groups like the Oath Keepers or extremist groups like the Proud Boys. That means not nearly 90% were not.
So if these people believe in what they were doing, who are they getting their information from? How could they truly put everything on the line and carry out this violence? Like, who is telling them what to do?
Well, we can see their media consumption from surveys that we've done after our studies of who broke into the Capitol. We find that fully 21 million people believe two radical beliefs in America today. One, that Joe Biden is an illegitimate president, and two, that the use of force to restore Donald Trump to the presidency is justified. And their media sources of those 21 million, they come from 42% of the 21 million. Their main media source is Fox News, Newsmax, One America, that is mainstream conservative news. Their second most prominent news source is actually liberal and centrist media like CNN, NPR, CBS. And you might say, well, how could that be? It's because often when people watch ideas they disagree with, that makes them angry. Only 10% of the 21 million are getting their news mainly from right-wing social media like Gab or Telegram.
President Biden has said that he believes racism was a key part of the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. Have you seen anything that bears that out to be true?
Race is an element and race is a driver. So when we look at the counties that the 700 who broke into the Capitol came from, where they live, what we see is over half live in counties that Joe Biden won. They don't mainly come from the reddest parts of America. They're coming from San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York City, Philadelphia, Houston, and Dallas. Further, when we look at the key characteristic of why some counties and not others, what we see is the counties that sent the insurrectionists are the counties losing the most white population. Well, that dovetails with this right-wing conspiracy theory that used to be part of the fringe called the Great Replacement. The idea that whites are being replaced. This idea is also that the Democratic Party is doing this deliberately. Well, that idea now is voiced by mainstream political leaders, by mainstream media figures, embraced full throttle.
So what are the triggers that you are watching? Because I know you have said in the past, this isn't just about violence in Washington. You could see sparks of violence in Atlanta, Georgia, in other major cities. What is the trigger?
That's exactly right. So what we're seeing in our surveys, our national surveys of the 21 million in the insurrectionist movement, is a mass of combustible material. Think of it as like dry wood that can be set off from a lightning strike or a spark, as in wildfires. Well, we're moving into a highly volatile 2022 election season where there could be many sparks at the local levels. And a lot of our election laws, say Georgia or Texas, the counting of the vote has been more politicized than ever before. What that does is it creates a very dangerous season, which means as we go through the 2022 election season, it's crucial to have dialogue with our political leaders, our community leaders, especially the White House, over this new empirical reality.
Professor, important work. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you, Mark.
We'll be back in a moment. That's it for us today. Thank you for watching. Be sure to join us next Sunday when we talk exclusively to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.